Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Ken Jones. By day, Ken is the Senior Director of Procurement, Vendor Relations, Minority and Women-Owned Businesses for EPB. The rest of the time, most people know Ken as Mr. Chattanooga. Ken, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before we talk about your incredible journey growing up in Chattanooga and now thriving here, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
Hot chocolate.
Hot chocolate?
Yes, sir.
I think that might be the first person that's said, good for you, man.
Yeah. I used to try to drink coffee as a kid because my granny drank it like all day long.
Yeah.
And I tried to drink it with her, but I would just have to put a 5-pound bag of sugar in one cup. So I just tried hot chocolate and like, I love it. Let's do it.
Man, do you have one every morning?
Just about. Yeah. So even when I have coffee meetings, my coffee is hot chocolate.
Now, that's the way to live life. I never thought of that. You know, you always think hot chocolate is an indulgence, but why not have it every morning?
That's right.
You know who would really like to hear this is my wife.
Oh, is that right? She's a hot chocolate drinker?
Well, by the time she gets done with her coffee, it's hot chocolate.
I like it.
Well, I'm so glad you're here. I've heard a lot about you, but didn't get to meet you till a few months ago, and I got to spend some time on the golf course with you, so now I know how you really are.
Right.
But you know, the Mr. Chattanooga thing, it's said a little bit in jest, but you can't walk down the street without 10 people walking up to you saying, "Ken, what's going on, man?"
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you, Mike, for having me. It's an honor to be on your show. I've heard a lot of your previous guests and just getting to know them a little bit better. So it's an honor to be here today. And
I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, thank you. Glad I've gotten a chance to get to know you a little bit. Yeah, the Mr. Chattanooga thing is kind of funny. All my friends make fun of me about it just because, as you know, I've been able to get to know a lot of people, born and raised here. Spent all my life here. So got a chance to get to know a lot of people, enjoy working with a lot of people in the community, and not only that, within my role at EPB as well. And so I just love people and try to be the best I can to individuals when I meet them.
Well, that's what I've found out about you, and I will want to get into your role at EPB, but I want to start at the beginning. You're born and raised in Chattanooga, so talk a little bit about that, where you grew up, and what I want to get to is where you are today, but those things influenced who you are.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I grew up here in Chattanooga, as you mentioned, in the Willa Homes Housing Projects that's out on the south side of town. Mm-hmm. My mom was a single mom raising my brother and I. We stayed out there for 13 years. I was 13 years old when we finally moved out. I got a chance to watch my mom just grind and work her tail off, at times working 2 and 3 jobs, trying to support my brother and I. And that's where my work ethic came from, is just watching her just with the grit and resilience and grind and the can-do attitude.
Yeah.
That rubbed off on me. She was my biggest mentor, my biggest supporter, and I always just loved watching her and spending time with her. But she was a lot of times working, trying to take care of us. And so I spent a lot of time with my granny, who just lived a few blocks up the street from us. And so I really loved her and enjoyed that. And I can remember as a kid, she was teaching me how to cook when I was 9 years old.
Your granny was?
Yeah.
What was she teaching you to cook?
Everything. I mean, we cooked everything from homemade biscuits to mac and cheese to neck bones to pork chops to greens to squash to casseroles, you name it. She cooked it, and I was right there with her, measuring and stirring and mixing and putting in the pans and all that stuff.
Was your brother right there too, or was he not into cooking?
My brother was more so outside. He was a bigger outside person than I was. So he would always be outside playing, running around and things like that. And I'd be the one in the kitchen just because I always just really loved spending time with my granny. She was another big hero of mine as well.
You still like cooking today?
I do. I don't cook as much just because I'm always on the go, but I still love doing it. And a lot of times for family gatherings or friend gatherings and things like that, I would cook and put stuff on the grill or whatever the case may be.
So you grew up in Wheeler Homes, but you moved to, what was it, Avondale?
Yeah.
After that, and then after that, some in East Chattanooga. But you went to a lot of different schools too. Can you talk a little bit about growing up with a single mom, with your brother, and living in Wheeler Homes? Just those influences on you, and some of the, lack of a better term, hardships of growing up like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as a kid early on in life, I didn't realize there was anything different, right? And so that was my norm.
Because that was your world, right?
That's right. Yeah, that was my norm and my world. And so I could remember things as simple as borrowing eggs from a neighbor, or a cup of flour, a cup of sugar to make cornbread, or whatever the case we were making or doing or whatever. And then my mom started making a little bit more money, and she was able to move us out of the housing projects, and we moved over into the Avondale area. It was a big culture shock for me, because there was things that I wasn't exposed to, things that I just didn't know anything about.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, like there were gangs related stuff.
Oh, yeah?
Because back in that time when I was a teenager, I grew up on the south side of town, but being on the east side of town, there was these rivalry between these gangs that I honestly didn't know anything about. And by me being a kid from the south side, they just assumed that I was a part of that gang affiliation.
They weren't embracing you as the new kid in town.
No, they were not at all, And I can remember times just running home from school because like it was a group of guys that thought I was a part of another gang, and so I didn't want to try to fight 4, 5, 6 guys at a time, right? And then, there was a point where I just got tired of running. I was like, well, either they're going to kick my butt or I'm going to kick somebody's butt, but more likely they're going to kick mine. It's more them than me, right? And so, I started fighting back, and, that was a thing where it was a survival, right? So it was survival. And then I realized that I had to choose a side, because even within the school, like those guys there were certain groups that didn't like each other, right? And so I had to figure out which side of these, what I thought was the lesser of two evils, that would really, quote unquote, be on my side. But
so growing up in Wheeler Homes and spending a lot of time with your granny, I most likely intentionally, all that cooking and spending time with you was to keep you away from a lot of that, wouldn't you say?
That's exactly right. Yeah. Because, like I said, it was a culture shock to me.
Yeah.
I was 13 years old, moving to another side of town, and I'm like, wait, what is all this stuff going on? This stuff happens in the world. You only see this stuff on TV, but it was reality at that point in time for me.
So when you made that decision, you had to stand up for yourself. Yeah. Was there a particular incident that you remember that you said, okay?
Yeah, it was actually. It was this girl that I liked, and I was walking home with her.
It's always a girl.
Yeah, I know, right? And I was walking home with her, and it was interesting because the guys that were in this gang were actually kin to her. And so they didn't want me talking to her. And then plus they, the new kid on the block, so to speak, right? So I had all these strikes against me. And then finally I was just like, you know what? Like, I'm tired. Like, I'm tired of running. I'm tired of all this. Like, enough's enough.
So in moving, you went to a lot of different schools too. How much of that being the new kid in each of those schools contributed to your outwardness today? Because you have a great ability to meet people and make them feel at ease. Was that part of showing up in a new school and people going, who's this guy? Yeah,
I think that has a lot to do with it, just because, when you go into a new environment, you got to find a way to meet people, to relate to people, to connect with people, right? And so going into the different schools, and I went to 3 different high schools, so that's another reason why I know a lot of people in Chattanooga, right? Just because, you got all these different areas of town, and so like when you go to these different schools, you meet so many different people. And, early on, it was just more so like survival at a younger age, more so than it is today, is really recognize the importance of people and who they are, and getting to know people for their genuine selves. And so that's important to me, to build those types of relationships today. Yeah, and what you just described sounds a lot like what we would tell someone who's entering the workforce for the first time about networking. Those relationships are important.
Talk about your high school a little bit. I know you went to Kirkman and a couple different places, and the challenges you faced, and because I want to get to getting out of high school and some of the life events that made you who you are.
Yeah, great. So Kirkman was actually one of the best schools around for me. I was not necessarily your traditional student. I was more so a guy that was really good with his hands and could take anything apart and most of the time get it back together. I remember, I got to take a quick sidebar. I remember as a kid, my mom was off at work and I took her radio apart. And because I just love tinkering with things, right? And I could not get it back together, so it didn't work anymore.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was not a fun day when she got home and realized her radio was tore up because I couldn't put it back together.
Did you ever get it back together?
No, not right. No, not at all. So,
how old were you?
I was probably 10 years old, maybe 11 or something like that. So I just took it apart and was like, what is this? What is that? Oh, wow, this is cool, And then I was like, oh, now I got to put all this back together. And I got most of it back together, but it just didn't work anymore. So, she was not real happy. But I was always really good with my hand, right? And so Kirkman was a school that I took electronics in. And so I learned a lot about resistors, transistors, all the different components, power sources, all those different things that make up electronics. So people don't realize the PC board that runs your microwaves, your stoves, your dishwashers, your refrigerators, your TVs, all those kinds of devices, right? And so I was able to repair those. At the time when I was in high school, Kirkman, the electronic department, used to make all the power surge strips for Hamilton County schools.
Really?
Yeah. We sit there. I remember our electronics teacher, he taught us how to wind those coils on the magnet. So you would wind them on the steel bar and you put it in and you put all these different devices and components together. And that's what helped make the surge protector. So, we got to do all kinds of really cool things like that. All the TVs and stuff that was in the school system, we repaired them, all those kinds of things.
What's interesting about that from an education standpoint, because you're a few years younger than me, but you're coming up through high school at a time when everyone's pushing traditional college on everyone. And that's what affected places like Kirkman. They didn't put a value on vocational training and skills like that. And it's made a huge difference. And I think you just gave a great testimony on why it's so important. How long were you at Kirkman?
A year and a half.
Yeah,
I was there. I spent my 10th grade year there and the first semester of my 11th grade year. And unfortunately, because of my attitude, I had to go. The electronics teacher and I didn't quite get along as much as he was teaching me. But, I never really had that male authority in my life growing up. And so, he was not a mean teacher, hindsight 2020 looking back on it. But at the time, I didn't realize that he was really just trying to help and pour into me and help me become more of a man, right? But it was more of a friction, in my opinion, at that time, just because, like I told you a little bit about moving to that side of town and the fights and the friction that I had, right? So it was more of a friction, and so I ended up getting kicked out of Kirkman. So
you talked about not having that male influence and being to recognize that he's probably got your best interest at heart. Because of moving there, you saw that more as a challenge to you, and maybe he being an extension of that whole thing?
That's exactly right, because, it was, for me, it was survival, right?
Yeah.
It was like, how do you survive? You got to fight to survive. It's that grit, that grind in the survival mode. And so with him, quote unquote, trying to tell me what to do, I'm like, I'm doing my work. Why do you have to be telling me all these other things? Like, this is what you're supposed to be teaching me. And that's the mindset that I had. And so with him trying to pour into me things about life, and I never had a male to pour those things about life into me. And so that was a bit of a challenge just from my perspective, not necessarily from his.
Yeah.
Now, back then I thought it was all him and it wasn't me, but just being able to receive that information from a male was very, very challenging for me.
Well, it's got to be pretty frustrating too, because I grew up differently, obviously, and didn't have that same challenge put in front of me. But I had teachers I didn't get along with and thought they didn't have my best interest at heart too. But I'm just trying to relate from the standpoint of being 14, 15-year-old kid, and you're in a new school and all these challenges come, your head's got to be swimming going, what the heck is going on here?
Oh, absolutely. It's all over the place because, I was always a pretty smart kid, I would say. I never made like horrible grades or anything, and I could get my schoolwork done. And, I wasn't like the valedictorian or nothing like that, but, I understood the subjects and things like that, so for me, I don't understand why you are on me so much. Like, leave me alone. Let me do my work. I'm getting the work done. When we have to repair something or fix something, I'm learning it at a good pace to where it's getting taken care of. I'm not blowing anything up. I can actually go
That's
back.
Important.
I can actually go back and fix my mom's radio now.
But it was gone. Did you ever go fix that thing?
No. She ended up getting rid of it and ended up getting a different one. But no. So
might be a good birthday present this year.
That's right.
I got you a new radio.
That's right. Yeah.
So you leave Kirkman after that, and where you go?
So I went to City High School for my second semester of my 11th grade year. And I never will forget when I first went over there, they said, do you want to take honors English or regular English? And I'm like, let's do honors English. I've never done honors English a day in my life. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And so they said, okay. So they put me in honors English, and it was the first period of the day. So the very first class. And I walk in there and they're doing Shakespeare. They're reading Shakespeare books. And I'm like, oh my God, what is this thee and thou and all of that? Like, I don't like this stuff. Like, I'm not reading this. And so I was a rebel. And every morning, first period of class, I went in the classroom, I put my head on the desk, and I went to sleep. And I did not do my work. I got everything done except for the Macbeth stuff, but I went to sleep because they was talking about Macbeth and the other Shakespeare. I don't even remember the other Shakespeare book we read.
Now, see, this I can relate to. Because, Shakespeare in high school, same thing. Yeah.
Right.
What is it? What is all this?
Exactly. So that was not a very smart choice, but, that's what I did. All my other classes, I mastered those. I'd done great in those. Had a really good time, met some really cool people over at City. And I never will forget at the end of that semester in English, there was this big fat F.
Oh.
Yeah. It's like, oh, man, you can't go to the 12th grade unless you go to summer school. And I was like, oh, I guess I'm going to summer school. And so I went to summer school and completed and fixed that F and passed English. I did not do honors summer school, but I finished English class and was able to move to my senior year. And during that time is when we moved to East Chattanooga, which put me in a different school zone.
Quick question back to summer school. How different is the summer school experience than regular school in terms of not necessarily the academics, but the students around and what's going on?
Yeah, I think for me, it's a smaller group of people in the first place, right? Because it's really only for those students who had to go for whatever reason it was that they had to go. And so it's a smaller group. I think, too, at least for me in that moment, it was sort of an eye-opener for me because I'm like, oh, wow, like I might not get a chance to go to my senior year in high school if I don't get this done. And so I had a little bit more of a focus to get that done during summer school than I did doing regular school. Mm-hmm. And so I was a little bit more focused during that time. And this was also the time where, they start talking about college. We mentioned college earlier, right? And so I never will forget the day that my mom and I were sitting in the living room and the recruiter from DeVry came. And he sat in our living room. He was talking to us. And like I told you, I wasn't a traditional student. I was more of a hands-on. Yeah. And so that curriculum they had with electronics fit right in line to what I had already been doing, what I knew, what I really enjoyed doing. And so I remember my mom asking the question, how much would this cost? And he said, oh, it's probably about $10,000 a year.
Wow. That's pretty steep. I mean, this was, 30 years ago?
Yeah, 1990.
Yeah.
The summer of 1990. And I was like, $10,000. And I heard my mom say, well, we'll figure out a way to do it. And in my heart and in my mind, I knew that she could not afford that.
Yeah.
Not take care of my brother, take care of the house, and then pay $10,000 extra a year for me to go to school. I knew that. And so from there, I was like, I got to do something different. And I never will forget, I was just so happy to be sitting on the couch, and there was a commercial for the Marines that came on. And they had those dress blues, and they had the sword. And I was like, that's me. That's what I want right there. And so I talked to a recruiter and, asked all the questions. I went and took the ASVAB test, passed it with flying colors. And I enlisted in their what they call delayed entry program.
Because you still had your senior year, didn't you?
That's exactly right. And so it was a program to where you can enlist in the military, and then once you graduate high school, you can then go to basic training and all the things, right? And so I did all of the work, enlisted. I was going to be an aviation mechanic. I really wanted to be a fighter pilot, but they told me I couldn't be a fighter pilot because I had corrected vision at the time. And so the next best thing was to work on them. And I'm like, sure, that'll be cool. And then I talked to the recruiter. I was like, well, will they ever take the mechanics up in the plane? He said, maybe. But I was like, well, if I can get a maybe and get close enough, then I'm doing it, And so I enlisted to be an aviation mechanic, and I was scheduled to leave the day after high school graduation.
And before we get to graduation, I want to point out you went to 4 different, let me see, Piney Woods, East Lake Middle, East Lake Junior, Hardy. So that's 4. And then 2 high schools, Kirkman and what was after?
City.
And none of them exist today.
None of them exist today.
What is this, Ken Jones?
I know. I know. It's something about that. I was actually talking about this a few months ago to some friends, and we were just reminiscing about life and in general. And I was like, all of the schools that I attended, with the exception of Brainerd High School, are no longer the same school, or no longer there.
Isn't that amazing?
It is. It is. And actually, about a summer and a half ago, summer of 23, I was actually with a friend, and we went over to the incline, and we got bikes, and we rode bikes. And I was like, let's go over here to Willa Holmes. I hadn't been over there in a while. And I went back, and I actually took a picture in front of Piney Woods Elementary School, which the school is still there, but they don't use it. And so I took a picture in front of it as just a memory. And then I went over to where I grew up at 4905 Edinburgh Drive, and I took a picture in front of that. And then I went to 705 East 49th Street, which is where my granny stayed. And I took a picture in front of that. And
Very cool.
And I posted that on social media as just a reminder of where I came from and, where God has brought me in my life. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is. And I'm spending so much time on this part of it because, any kid that goes to 2 or 3 schools is going to be like, oh my God. Yeah. To a great degree, you were an Army brat, but because you're moving schools.
Yeah.
So you go to the 4 schools, you go to the 2 high schools, you get into Brainerd, you talk to DeVry, that didn't work out. So your plan is the delayed entry into the Marines. You go to Brainerd, then your plan goes awry. What happened?
Yeah, so a little bit of some of the same, being the new kid on the block, right? And
particularly in high school, man.
Yeah, and your senior year on top of that. Just imagine that, right? And so everybody else within the school, just about, they all kind of grew up together, so they all kind of know each other from the same general neighborhoods and things like that. And now this new kid comes in, and there were some people that embraced me, right? There were some people that knew me from just different things around and stuff like that. And then there was some people that didn't like me, just because I was from a different area and a different place, and all those kinds of things. And so long story short, I was doing really good my first semester, I should say. So the first semester ended really well, and then started the second semester. It was a little bit of tension between me and a few other people, and things like that. And so I never will forget, on January 30th, 1991, about 5 months from graduation, because we were scheduled to graduate June the 8th of 1991, I got in trouble. I got 2 aggravated assault charges, ended up going to juvenile because I was a juvenile at the time, spent 15 days in juvenile. Then I was released from juvenile on house arrest. And during this time while I was in juvenile, the teachers were sending my schoolwork, so I was getting my schoolwork done. And even when I got out, they were still sending their my schoolwork, so I was getting my schoolwork done. And I think it was finally around the April, maybe late March, early April timeframe, the school board had their hearing, and they expelled me from school, so they kicked me out.
After, what'd you say, 3 months?
Yeah, it was probably that early April timeframe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really left you hanging.
Yeah, because I was doing all my work. Even though I wasn't in school, I was still doing all my work. And so they finally officially expelled me and kicked me out of high school. So I did not get a chance to graduate. And because I didn't get a chance to graduate, and because it was a juvenile offense, and I had enlisted in the Marines as a juvenile, and the cases were not dismissed, then the Marines also had to kick me out. And so that whole plan of going to the Marines just all went away.
So you're a 17, 18-year-old kid, and you've planned, you've got a plan, and you're feeling good about it, and all this happens. What's that do to you? I mean, you got to be completely discouraged.
Oh, I was. And I blamed everybody except for myself. I took no accountability for it.
Really?
Yeah, it was everybody else's fault. It was not my fault.
Do you think that was more of a maturity issue?
Oh, 100%. 100%. At that time, yeah. Hindsight 2020, it was all my fault. I've taken complete accountability for it now. But at that time, I was angry. I was mad. I was like, why is the world against me? You know, why do I have to go through all these crazy things? All the things, just every excuse after another, blaming everybody except for taking accountability for the actions that I took.
And being in that position, having all the, feeling the world's against you, you could have gone in another direction pretty darn easy.
Yeah.
The wrong direction.
Yeah, and I was headed in that direction. I really was, Mike. It was not an easy path because I was still trying to figure it out. I was super young, and, I was 17 when all of that happened. I turned 18 in May, that May of that year. And so now I'm an adult and still with this anger and this bitterness and this hatred and mad at the world philosophy.
Yeah.
And it didn't serve me very well, right? And, and I was just living, right, and just trying to figure everything out. And, I realized the hurt that it caused my mom, that, her kid got kicked out of high school and didn't get a chance to graduate. I didn't walk across the stage, with my other classmates or anything like that, right? And so that was a big discouragement for myself, and it was a big hurt to her. And then, so I just kind of went through this period of, hindsight 2020, I probably would say I was a little depressed at that time.
Yeah, probably.
Didn't realize it. At the time, it wasn't highly spoken of or talked about, at least, from where I grew up and things like that. And so, I started just kind of working whatever, because I was, like I said, I was on probation for the charges or whatever. And so I started working at Burger King and just to have a job and just to do things. And then finally I mustered up the courage to go take my GED that December of that year. So December 1991, I took the GED test at Chat State and I passed it. And so I was awarded my GED.
Did you have any mentors or influences at this time who were trying to help direct you? Or was this just you going, I'm tired of this, I've got to take responsibility and do some things on my own?
Yeah, I, honestly, truthfully, if I be completely transparent, it was the probation that I was on.
Yeah.
And it was the fact that I was afraid that if I didn't do something halfway right, that I would either end up in jail or juvenile or something like that.
Because they weren't going to give you a break at that point.
They were not. No.
Probably just looking for you to mess up because you're on probation. That way we could deal with you in another way.
That's exactly right. I think that was a big driver. Now, I will say the probation officer that I had was really a great man. And, he was very patient and really kind of encouraged me and, tried to talk to me about a lot of different things to help me get on the right track. And so that was a big benefit. But I still didn't see that as like a mentor or somebody that was really trying to help me. I saw that as, well, he's just trying to do a job and I better listen to him so I don't go to jail or go to juvenile, right? And so it wasn't the mentality that I have today. If I was looking back on that, I would say that he was being a mentor. He was being a true guide. But at that time, it was just like, he's doing his job and I got to make sure I do what I do so I don't go get locked up behind bars somewhere.
Well, in hindsight, does give us better recognition of those important influences on our life. But, just talking to you, I find it amazing, honorable, and everything else that you're because you're really standing on a precipice. You could have gone either way, but you chose. Was it your mom's influence, or what you didn't want to embarrass your mom anymore? Or?
Yeah, that was a lot of it, right? I was like I said, I was angry
Yeah.
and bitter and all those things, but just seeing the disappointment and the hurt on her face,
Yeah.
is something that really stuck with me. And even to this day, I've sat down with her and talked to her and apologized and, all the things. And a mother's love is a mother's love.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, baby. I still love you no matter what. Right. And so she's been great about it. But, I did really recognize and understand the hurt and the pain that caused her.
Yeah. So you go and you get your GED. What do you do from there? You go to Chat State?
So not originally right off. I just kind of started working. I was working a couple odds and ends jobs and working at Burger King and all the things. And then I was working at Arby's. I ended up becoming a manager at Burger King at like 19. I don't know how I did it. I'll be honest with you. It was just one of those things that, I knew how to work hard. Like I said, I watched my mom work hard. And so I did that. And then I remember one day the general manager from Arby's, he came in there. I didn't know who he was at the time, of course, but he came in there and I served him and all the things. And I do remember walking out in the lobby and checking on the lobby and checking on the guests and making sure they were all good. And before he left, he came and gave me his card. He said, "Call me. I want to talk to you." And I'm like, "I don't even know who you are. What do you want to talk to me about?" But, I did. I called him later and he's like, "I was really impressed with how you handled the store and how you took care of the customers, et cetera, et cetera. And I would like to talk to you about potentially coming to manage over at Arby's. We're looking for some managers." And I was like, "Oh, okay, sure."
Yeah.
Like in my mind, I had no idea what this was all about, right? And
Well, you're 19.
I'm 19, like, who is this guy that's giving me his card, telling me he wants to talk to me about a job? I'd never had that happen before. And so long story short, I finally went and talked with him and we had really good conversation and he was telling me about their management training program and offered me a lot more money than what I was making. And a 19-year-old making a lot more money, that was like, hey, you pay me a lot, let's go. And that was really the only deciding factor. During this time, I was like, well, I want to do something a little bit more as well. And so I enrolled in Chat State and, started taking a few classes, a little bit here and there, worked for Arby's for a couple of years and then ended up leaving Arby's because I was just burnt out with the fast food stuff. I had been working. Yeah. I've been working restaurants all my life, and so I was just burnt out with it.
Everyone needs to work in a restaurant sometimes. There's not a harder job going around.
That's exactly right. It'll teach you a lot, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Let me tell you.
So after Burger King, where you go?
So I went to the Arby's for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And then,
Arby's.
No, you're fine. And then I got burnt out with that, and so I left that, and I went to work for the carpet mills in Dalton.
Oh, that's a easy job, huh?
Oh, that is brutal. Yeah, that is brutal. That is brutal. That was one of the most physical, taxing jobs I've ever done in my life. And it was much needed at that time because it taught me that I did not want to do anything like that for a career.
Probably wore you out, too, to where you couldn't do much in your free time.
100% it did, because I was working 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 days on, 2 days off, rotation. And it was brutal. And that's when I was at the same time trying to go to Chat State. So I would get off at 7 a.m., drive back from Dalton to Chat State, try to pay attention in class, couldn't pay attention in class.
Yeah.
As soon as class was over, I would go home, try to go to sleep, and try to do schoolwork in the midst of it before I went back to work at 7 p.m.
So you had to be in Dalton at 7, which is 40-minute drive from here. You work from 7 to 7 a.m., 40-minute drive. What time you got to be at Chat State?
It was about 8.
About 8. And how long were classes?
About 12.
And then you go home, and then you got to kind of wind down and go to sleep for, 4 or 5 hours?
That's exactly right, yeah.
How long did you do that?
I did that for about a year.
Oh.
And my grades suffered, and so I withdrew that last semester and was like, I can't do this. And so I withdrew from Chat State, did not finish that, and just kind of kept working. And around this time is when I had my first son. And then after I had him, it was an eye opener for me. It's like, hey, you have a kid now. Like, you have to wake up and.
Was it like a switch that
it
you
was.
just said, you know what, we're serious now?
Yeah,
it's not just about me.
That's exactly right. Because, I at that time, well, growing up, I grew up without a dad.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I realized my son was coming, then I'm like, whoa, like I don't want him to have to deal with what I dealt with, growing up. And I have to be there for him, and I have to make sure that I'm present, make sure that I can provide and, take care of him and all those kinds of things. Right. And so, and even at that time when I knew about my son, at that particular time, I did not know about my daughter. And so I actually have two kids. They're 6 months apart. And so I did not know about my daughter at that time until she was about 6 years old.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big shocker as well. So just kind of leading up to that, here's my son's about to be born. He's born in July of 95. And I'm still, working these different jobs, not working in the carpet mills anymore because that's not going to work. Mm-hmm. And so I'm ended up landing through a temp service through Gem Products. They were bringing a division. It was a division of GE. They was bringing that into Chattanooga and setting up shop. And part of it was a warehouse, and they had an electronics shop. And so I started out in the warehouse piece of it. Mm-hmm. And I remember the electronics supervisor, he came and he would come to us and say, hey, I'm looking for this package and that package. When it gets here, if you don't mind, would you get that to me? I'm trying to do, pretty quick turnaround on certain things, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, sure. And so we would look out for it. And I never will forget that one first package came in. I took it in there to him, and his name was Paul. And I said, hey, Paul, here's your package you're looking for. And he was working on a PC board. And I was like, what are you doing working on a PC board? He's like, what do you know about a PC board? And so, we had a conversation, and I was looking at the schematic that he was looking at, and I just went through, so yeah, this right here is a resistor, and it's this ohms and this transistor and this, that, and the other. And here's your power supply. And, he looks up at me kind of strange, like, who is this kid that's working out here? How do you know all this stuff? And so, of course, I told him about my experience at Kirkman and, the things that we did at Kirkman. And he's like, okay, I'll keep that in mind. And so just kind of talking with him off and on. And then I never will forget, one day he came out into the warehouse, like, hey, I want to talk to you. And I was like, okay, like, what did I do? Like, did I forget a package or what, And so I went into his office, and he's like, I know you don't have the level of experience that we really need, but we're going to create a junior position. And if you're interested, we'll be willing to train you. He said, I got my experienced people I've already hired. He said, I've always enjoyed working next to you. You've been very pleasant and nice. And, I can tell you know enough to get started, but we can teach you the rest. Is this something you're interested in? And I'm like, sure. How much does it pay?
That's an important thing, particularly at that age. And you got a son and daughter.
That's exactly right. And so, he tells me, and of course, it's a lot more than working out in the warehouse. And I'm like, where do I sign? Sign me up. I'm in. And so, I started working in the electronics shop and was doing really well and just learning, a lot, and was really excited about that.
When you took that job with Jim, you had no idea what it would lead to next.
No, I did not. It was a trajectory for where I am today.
Yeah, and that's what I find so interesting, because you take it was a temp job at the time,
Mm-hmm.
right? Working in the warehouse, just happens to be next to the electronics folks, which you have a genuine interest in, and not out of the blue, but the fact that he observed your work ethic and your attitude, which is also very important. This opportunity presents itself. Mm-hmm. Was that kind of the thing that changed your trajectory?
100%. 100%. It helped me realize that no matter what your past is, no matter what challenges you've had in life, that if you do the right things and you treat people right, somebody will recognize that, And
what a great point.
Yeah. That's the philosophy that I try to live by today.
Yeah.
And, he was very encouraging to me and, really helped me learn some of those work-life balances.
Yeah.
And also helped me learn how to operate within a corporate environment.
Which is difficult in itself.
It is.
Kind of like going to a new school sometimes.
Exactly right. And I think that one of the big things was that, I always had this survival mentality, and he taught me that you can have a thrive mentality, and so that
Explain that a little bit.
Yeah. So when you're growing up in a space in an area where you don't have a lot, and sometimes you're not sure where your next meal will come from, or if the lights are going to be on the next day, or whatever the case may be, then you're in survival mode to do everything you can just to have the basics.
Yeah.
Right. And so that was kind of my life growing up. It's just, I just have the basics. And so with this ability to have this thriving mentality, it was more so, how do you be a positive influence in whatever space you're in? Right. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but like I said, the work ethic that I saw my mom demonstrate was the same work ethic that I was demonstrating.
Yeah.
And then when I was able to take that work demonstration and tie it into a need that somebody had, he had a need to get a certain thing at a certain time as soon as it got here, right? And I was able to follow through, right? And so part of any job that you're in, I believe, is that follow through piece. If somebody says, hey, can you deliver X? And you're like, yeah, I can deliver X. And then you deliver X. That's that follow through piece, right? And so how do you ensure that you're following through, providing people what they need, giving them what they need? And if you can't follow through with it, then you let them know why and say, hey, I know you wanted this by X time, but I'm only going to be able to deliver it at Y time. But here's the reasons why it's going to be Y time. And then people are more understanding. So just that ability to have that conversation, that's what I mean by that thriving piece.
How long were you at Jim?
I was there for about a year or so, year and a half. And then I was buying my first house, and I went to sign the insurance papers.
Wait, how old are you, about 20, 21?
Yeah, that was in 97. So I'm probably 24.
Yeah.
Somewhere in that
It's a
neighborhood.
young age to buy a house.
Yeah. It was a blessing in disguise. So I'm going to buy the house, and I'm signing an insurance paper, and the lady is like, hey, what do you do for a living? I'm like, oh, electronics technician, blah, blah, blah. She's like, well, my husband is looking for somebody with your background. Would you be interested in talking to him? And I'm like, sure. What is yeah, exactly. You know where my question's going. Exactly. And I'm like, well, what is it? She's like, telecommunications. And I'm like, tele what? Like,
Yeah.
I've never even heard this word before. What is that? Telecommunications. I said, you talking about telephones? And so we both kind of had a laugh. And she's like, well, that's some of it, but I'll let you talk to him. He can explain a little bit more. And so he called me, and we set up a time to go interview. And I went to interview with him and also the regional manager that same day. And then later that afternoon, he called me back and offered me a job. And I was like, well, how much does it pay? and he told me, and it was a little bit more than what I was making. And I was like, absolutely. You know, just bought a house and, you know, all the things. My son's 2 years old at this time. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. You know, so I went to work for Key Services at the time. And it's funny, we talk about the schools that are no longer there. Key Services is no longer there. And so I went to work for Key Services, and the first year was great. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about infrastructure cabling as it relates to phone systems, computer networks, audio systems, even video systems. And that's where I really learned my fiber optics experience through them as well, whether it's what we call inside plant, which is inside a building, or outside plant, which is outside on the poles or on the ground. And so I really learned a lot during that time frame. My first year, I grew very fast within that organization, and they had offices in Chattanooga. The corporate office was in Atlanta. They had an office in Macon, Georgia, Jacksonville, Florida, and then they had one in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, the North Carolina offices got the state contract, and so they was looking for some more help. And during this time, the Charlotte office needed a lot of help, and they couldn't hire people fast enough. And so they was reaching out to the other offices to see if they had people that could come up and work. And so they asked me, say, hey, will you be willing to go to Charlotte and work out of the Charlotte office? You know, they'll pay you $2 more on the hour. You'll have a truck to drive up there and back. They'll pay you per diem every day. And I was like, per diem? What's per diem?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so and they'll pay for your hotel and all that. And I'm like, pay for my hotel? What? Like, so free travel? Yeah, sign me up. I'll go. And so, you know, I went up and I would working out of the Charlotte office, and I would leave on Sunday afternoon after church, drive up to Charlotte, stay in the hotel Sunday through Friday, come back home Friday evening, and all this time. And about this time is when I actually had got married my first time. And so that was hard.
Yeah.
That was hard having a 2-year-old kid,
Yep.
a wife at the time, been on the road, all week long, coming home Friday night, missing out on my son's activities and things like that. So they got to be really, really tough.
Yeah.
And so I did that for about a year. And I was like, I got to find something else. Like this is no different than how I grew up. I'm not seeing my kid. I'm not putting him in the bed. Right. And so I started looking, and I found this company called Executone. And Executone was looking for somebody with my experience. And so I went to work for them, and I left Key Services, and I worked for Executone for right at about a year, just south of a year. And it was a very small business, family owned. The owner was absolutely great. Him and his wife both owned it and worked there. And I know the guy that was my manager and the guy that trained me there, both absolutely excellent people. I started there probably 99, and the guy that was my manager left and went to EPB February of 2000. The guy that trained me left and went to EPB April of 2000. And so come around, let's say July, August time frame of 2000, the guy was my manager, calls me like, "Hey, what are you doing?" I'm like, "I'm working. What are you doing?" And he's like, EPB is looking to hire some people, and we need another person. And I've always enjoyed working with you. I think you'll be a good fit over here. All the things, right? And I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, I'm happy where I am. I'm doing well, and they treat me fine." And it's like, "No, you really need to talk to him." And I'm like, "Okay, I'll talk, I guess." And so I went to interview with EPB and had a great interview, and they offered me the job the same day of the interview, right after the interview. And I never will forget, they paid me more money, of course. And so I went and wrote up my 2 weeks notice, and I turned it in to the owner. It's like, "Hey, I'm sorry, great opportunity." And he was like, "If I match their offer, will you stay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I love it here. Like I'm only leaving because they're paying me a lot more money." And he said, "Okay, I'll match the offer." So I'd send back to EPB, "Hey, I'm staying." He matched their offer, and I'm gonna stay here. I'm really happy here. He takes good care of me, all the things. And so they countered his offer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, "Oh my goodness." And I was like, "Hey man, they counted your offer." And he's like, "I can't compete with that. I'm a small business. I can't." I'm like, "I understand." I said, "I'm so sorry. Like it's hard for me to leave. It's hard for me to leave, but like I have to leave."
Yeah.
And he's like, "I totally understand." So on and so forth. So that was how I ended up at EPB. And I started October 23, 2000.
Wow. And just go through, each position, because I want to get to where you are today before we run out of time. You started at what position with EPB?
As a network technician. So I started out in that role. We were installing phone lines and internet and equipment to provide that. And that's where I started. And I think one of the big things for me with EPB is I was just always willing to take on whatever they threw my way. Yeah. No matter what it was. If there was something new, something different, I'd raise my hand and say, "Hey, I'm willing to do it. I'll try it. Don't have a clue what it is, but I'll try it."
Because EPB wasn't doing fiber optics before you got there. It wasn't until, 07, 08?
That's correct. So we did have a small fiber optics network at that time. It was not to the masses where we deployed to our whole service territory. So we did have some fiber optics at that time, which is one of the reasons why I believe they brought me on, is because I had that experience and that knowledge. And so I spent 2 years in the network technician role. Within 2 years, I was promoted to a senior network technician. I spent in that role probably for about 8 or 9 months, and then I was promoted to supervisor, which put a pin there. If you remember, I told you the guy that was my manager and trained me at the previous job actually went there. Mm-hmm. I became their supervisor.
Wow.
Yeah, and you would think that's great, but it was horrible.
Well, I was gonna ask you how that adjustment went, because that's very difficult to be promoted from within and be managing people who not necessarily were your peers, but may have been your supervisors.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That, and they're the ones that taught me a lot on my previous job and at EPB.
Was that more difficult for you or for them?
I would say more difficult for me, but I would also say it was very difficult for them.
Yeah.
You know, and I'll give you a really good example. This is when I really had no idea how to lead people. And this was a big turning point for me. And I remember the guy that trained me at my previous job, he started doing some of the work that I was doing as a technician. And I never will forget, he came into my office asking me a question about where to place equipment on the wall. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, you trained me how to do all this stuff. Why are you asking me this question? Like, I trust you, go do it, whatever the case may be. Like, whatever you think, just go do it, right? And so he kept pushing and pushing for me to tell him where to put it. And then finally, I just got frustrated. I was like, hey, man, put it wherever you want. Just get out of my office asking me that question. Like, why are you keep asking me where to put some equipment? And I know you know how to do this. Well, what I did not know at the time is what he was looking for is confirmation from his leader. And what my intent was is to show him that I believed in him. But the impact was not that.
Yeah.
The impact was I was not giving him what he needed as an employee, right? And he was just trying to be respectful to his leadership and say, hey, I want to make sure that you're happy and comfortable with what I am doing so I can make sure that I'm doing the right things by you.
Yeah.
And I totally missed that. And I had so many things just like that to happen as a leader because I'm looking at these guys as y'all were here before me. Y'all know this stuff way better than I do. Like, y'all should be telling me how to do it, you know? And so it was a big, big miss on my part. Yeah.
And it's almost like you accepted your leadership role, but with them, it was a little bit different because you taught me and you were showing deference to a great degree.
Yeah, yeah, and so it was just a challenge in and of itself. It was at the time I did not like being a supervisor in that space, in that role, just because I'm like if this is what being a supervisor is, I don't want no part of this. This is terrible.
Yeah.
You know?
Let me go back to what I was doing.
That's exactly right. You know, because I was, like I said, I was really great with my hands and doing things and fixing things and all that stuff, but I was not great at leading people.
Yeah.
And so that was a big turning point for me, and I didn't quite understand why. And so I stayed in that position for a little bit over a year, I think it was. And then I got promoted to a project consultant because we at this time, EPB had really started deploying fiber to just our commercial customers. It was not even the mass deployment that you talked about in 2007, 2008. We were doing a trial to learn how to deploy fiber to our commercial customers. And so we needed somebody more so full-time managing the contractors, managing the design, putting all the different pieces of the puzzle together. So that's what I was doing. And so I got promoted into that role. And in that role, it was more of like a project manager's role. So I had no direct reports to me, but I worked alongside of a lot of people. And what I started to do was pay attention to how other leaders were treating their people, how other leaders talked to their people, how they led, some of the things that they'd done, taking note of the things that I liked and taking note of the things that I didn't like, and then trying to understand how would I want to be treated myself. And then I started trying to incorporate some of those things.
So a lot of your learning to lead was not necessarily, we're going to send Ken to a leadership class.
Yeah.
It was more hands-on learning from your mistakes, which,
That's exactly
which
right.
are the best lessons.
Yes.
And becoming a better leader that way.
That's exactly right. And so it was really me trying to figure out why was that experience so bad.
Yeah.
Like it was bad. And I was like, that's not the type of experience that I want. And so it's not the type how I want to lead relationships. And so how do I fix that?
And a lot of people in your shoes wouldn't be able to recognize that or have that self-discussion saying, this one's on me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've got to get better at this. Before we run out of time, I want to get to a couple more things.
Sure.
You got your GED in 1991.
Yes.
Associate's degree in 2007.
Yes.
Bachelor's degree in 2017.
Yes.
And an MBA in 2019.
Yes.
Did you ever realize you were such an academic?
No, I didn't. No, like I said, I was more of a hands-on guy and not an education guy, right? But, through this whole journey at EPB, I wanted to finish up my associate's degree. And so I went back to school and I finished up my associate's degree in 2007. And I always said that once my kids graduated high school, that I was going to go back to school and get my undergrad degree. And so my daughter, she graduated in 2013, and then my son graduated high school in 2014. I was enrolled in UTC in August of 2014. And so I buckled down. I was originally going to go, because my associate's degree is in electrical electronic engineering, and I was originally going to go for engineering. But as I kind of progressed in my career, I was like, well, I know the technical side pretty good. I want to learn more about the business side.
Yeah.
And so I enrolled in UTC in the College of Business, Gary Rollins College of Business, and I took up business entrepreneurship. Because I said I wanted to understand.
That's smart.
Yeah, I want to understand a broad range. And another part of that was, early on in my career, I had started my own business. And I started that business in roughly 2001 or something like that. And about 2 or 3 years later, I closed it. And the reason I closed it was I was at this pivotal point where I was working full time at EPB, had my side business, and I had to make a decision to whether I stopped my side business because it was growing and I was making just as much money, or do I stay with the stable health insurance, all the things, right? And so I chose the stable because I had kids and I wanted to make sure I can have health insurance and all those things. And so that has always kind of haunted me in the back, not in a bad way, but like, why didn't you bet on yourself?
Yeah, kind of a what if.
Yeah. And so I've always kept that in mind. And so that was another point for driving me to that business entrepreneurship degree. And so I was working full time. I was going to school full time. Thankfully, my kids were out of school, high school and all that. So I didn't have babies running around in the house or anything. And so it was a grind for 5.5 years between my undergrad and my MBA. Wow.
But you did it.
I did.
And what age did you get your MBA?
So I was 46 with my MBA and 44 with my undergrad and 34 with my associates.
And you're never too old to go back.
You're not.
And I'd imagine at that stage of your career, that was more for you than anything
That's correct.
else. And your mother.
That's correct.
Quite frankly.
Yeah. So with that undergrad graduation, because I didn't walk across the stage with my associates, but that undergrad, I walked across the stage. I had my cap and gown on, and it was such an amazing feeling and thought. And my mom was right there; she got to witness the whole thing. So yeah,
that's tremendous. I want to read you a quote I wrote down. You're talking about your mother, and I love this quote. Mom retired in 2021. My brother and I take care of her now.
That's right.
That's got to make you feel something.
It does. So it's a blessing that, we watched her all of our lives just bust her tail to make sure we had everything she could possibly give us.
Yeah.
And, and she retired, almost 4 years ago, April 1st. Look at that. 4 years ago today, right? She was able to retire. And, my brother and I, we have been blessed in our careers. My brother is a bondsman, Carlos Bell Bonding, and my career at EPB has been great. And so we both take care of her. She doesn't have to pay for a thing. And when she wants to go on the trip, we're going to pay for it. When she wants to do whatever she wants to do, we're going to pay for it, and just let her enjoy life and enjoy the fruits of her labor. So absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Before I get to our last question, I do want to remind our listeners who makes all this possible, and it's thank you to the Tennessee Valley Authority for sponsoring My Morning Cup. You can follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do-good-here to explore exciting career opportunities at TVA. Last question for you, Ken. What would you tell that 25-year-old Ken Jones is important for a happy life?
Relationships with people, just really genuine, authentic relationships with people, and just treating people well is really the key. That has been the thing that has transitioned my life and transformed my life and allowed me to live such a rich, fulfilled life. It's just understanding the value that I find in everybody I meet. And I'm reminded, and I won't say the quote exactly right, but I'm reminded of a quote from Maya Angelou, when she said, people will forget what you've done or what you said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
I love that quote.
Yeah. And I try to do everything I can to live by that every single day, because I want people to feel valued, feel loved, feel like they're cared about. And I feel like if I can do that, then, my job is done.
And tying that back into your early days in school and moving and all, that's going to have something to do with wanting people to feel accepted and valued like that. Because you're going to 6 different schools.
That's right. That's right.
Well, you've got a fascinating story, Ken. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time to come talk.
Well, thank you. It's been an honor and a pleasure, and I'll always enjoy listening to my morning cup, and I'm thankful that you and I have had the opportunity to meet and build a relationship, and I'm looking forward to continuing to getting to know you even better, Mike. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it too, Ken. Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Constant Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.